ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency, Norway's Foreign Minister, Mr. Birger Brindy, the Honorable Mrs. Winnie Byanyima, Executive Director of Oxfam, the Honorable Nobel Peace Prize laureate Abdesatar bin Musa, our invited speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, it is my pleasure to be an MC for the Norad Conference 2020 with the theme Women's Rights and Gender Equality. My name is Laila Luthfiana, and I am also the representative from Indonesia. On behalf of the organizer, we wish to extend a warm welcome and thank you to all participants, guests of honor, foreign and local participants to this 7th Norad Conference. For your information, today we have about more than 50 participants and activists joining this conference. All participants come here to discuss on women's rights and gender equality. We hope to be able to conclude contributions as in these 3 days of conference. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. To begin with, I would like to invite Mr. John Lamay as a Norad's Director General to give his welcome speech. Please welcome Mr. John Lamay.
Foreign Minister, distinguished Nobel Prize laureate, Excellencies, this is my 4th week as Director General of Norad, and that means that I cannot claim a lot of the praise for what we're doing today and what we are celebrating today. But it's still my pleasure to welcome you all to a day when we will celebrate achievements in an important area, gender equality, when we will launch the 9th report about the results of Norwegian development cooperation. So we'll look back, we'll celebrate achievements, but we'll also look ahead at challenges, at what remains to be done in order to reach the targets that we set for ourselves in New York in September, but also dealing with some of the counter-forces that are making the fight for gender equality even more challenges. Because we have results, we have challenges, and we have counter-forces. That's why we also need leadership, and that's why Norway's historical role as an international leader in this field is so important, also with the preparedness to lead in areas that are controversial internationally. And
Thank you very much, Mr. John Lamay, for the remarkable speech. Next, we are honored to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Birger Brindy. He is currently the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Please welcome Mr. Birger Brindy.
Honorable Mr. Nobel Laureate, Jon Lomøy, I think you did really well in your 4th week. I heard you even in the radio this morning. I think it was like 6:40 or something on this important topic. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this is a great initiative. It's great to be back. It's great to see so many people here and friends. Violent conflicts, refugee crisis, and not at least discrimination of women. This is part of the gloomy global picture. But on the other hand, as also Mr. Lomøy mentioned, in September, the world adopted the new Millennium Development Goals. This is a global commitment to eradicate all extreme poverty by 2030. 20 years after the Beijing platform was adopted, this landmark platform, battles are still plentiful. A prime example is the work for international acceptance of sexual rights and right to abortion. This is central to women's and girls' ability to have control of their own bodies and lives, to prevent women from dying during labor. Another important example concerns the protection of women human rights defenders. The backlash against civil society and the denial of freedom of speech is unfortunately growing and not decreasing. These still remain core battlegrounds also in the years to come. We must fight the opponents head on. Challenges and opportunities for gender equality alike are covered in Norad's report on the results that Jon Lomøy will present later today. The report documents progress when it comes to women's situation in relation to health, education, and norms on women's rights. Maternal deaths are reduced by 45% globally since 2000. 2/3 of developing countries have achieved equal access to primary education for boys and girls. I'm glad to note that the report concludes that Norway has played an important role towards that end. When we talk about women's economic and political participation, it is more of a mixed picture. The recommendation is to focus on implementation of global commitments and to leave no girl behind. I could not agree more wholeheartedly. Development aid can only play a small, albeit important role towards global gender equality. We will not place women as passive recipients of aid. Our aim is to use a variety of measures, not least our political capital, to push for women's rights. Sisters are doing it for themselves, Annie Lennox sings. I'm a firm believer in that. Look at Malala. Look at the women in the Tunisian Jasmine Revolution. Look at the numerous women that organize for rights and livelihoods in their villages. Let there be no doubt. Norway will continue to play a leading role so that women and girls all over the world are able to set their own goals, to define their own future, and to fulfill their own potential. Nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burgerbendi, for the speech. One thing that I can forget about his speech is, we must not place women as passive recipients of aid. Then, move on to the next speaker. We have our second speaker, Mrs. Winnie Pianima, the Executive Director of Oxfam. Please welcome Mrs. Winnie Pianima.
Very much. I want to first thank Minister Björk Brandt, Director General Jon Lomøy, for inviting Oxfam and myself to speak at this very important conference of NORADs. It's an honor. The 20th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action is personally very significant for me. 1995 was my first year. I had just been elected a member of parliament in my country, Uganda. It was the first election. But winning that election wasn't easy at all. I was told from the beginning that my feminist election platform was going to be political suicide, because I was calling for equal value in government policies for women and for children, and yet I won that election with a huge landslide. I remember that day I was elected, women in my town running on the streets, climbing on top of cars, celebrating a victory for women. It remains in my mind, my proudest moment. Immediately after that election, the few of us who had been elected in that parliament, which was an important parliament to make a new constitution for my country, coming out of conflict, we formed a women's caucus. We moved and we influenced a gender-sensitive constitution for our country, and we really enshrined in there rights for women, affirmative action, quotas in local government. We changed the landscape for our country. That was a breakthrough. And so I went to Beijing with the wind in our sails and with optimism about the future, joined hands with other women from Africa, and Beijing was for us a historic moment because we connected our national struggles, our struggles for women's rights, with a global consensus and a global framework. Last point I want to make here is about social norms and tackling social and cultural norms. That is still a barrier that we foresaw 20 years ago, and that remains today, and that we have not managed to roll back. What should we do? A couple of things. I'm here with Norad. For Norad, a development agency that supports human rights and women's rights, I think it's important to continue and perhaps increase the support you give to the agents of change, to the women's movement. The support the women's movement has been getting has been drying up, as if the challenge is resolved. We see more forces that are pushing us back, but we don't see more power and more support to hold the ground. We need more support for the women's movement everywhere. And these resources should go right down to where the battles are. The battles over women's bodies, over their security, the battles for economic empowerment, and the battles underlying that which are to change the social norms. So investing more in the women's movement is critical, But also getting better at putting women's rights at the center of the main development agenda. We are almost giving up and saying we have failed. This is what I pick up, that gender mainstreaming has failed. If it fails, then what? We have to make it succeed. We have to be able to put women's rights in the water agenda, in the roads agenda, in the climate agenda, and that takes skill. That takes good skill, good analysis, and good planning, and targeting, and measuring results. And I find that increasingly, again, governments and even development agencies fall short of investing in that skill. They put some resources in analysis. They don't put resources in skills across sectors to get it right for women. It's important to get it right technically for women. And to recognize that it's expertise. If somebody has to build expertise on gender and climate change, someone has to get expertise on gender and infrastructure. You cannot get it without deepening the knowledge and the ability to mainstream. Once that is done, we must put the politics in the government. Governments, the political agenda is lost. They just want to say, we've allocated, it's a technical department, it's over there. But it's a political leadership that makes a difference. So challenging governments, NORAD, challenge the governments to go beyond their rhetoric, to actually drive the agenda. So the politics have to return, and having conversations on how committed are you, how much are you driving, where's your leadership beyond words is so important. I want to leave it there and say that 20 years on, I'm still fired up. I'm still fired up.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Winnie-Byanyima, for the speech and the share of experience in facing women's rights and gender equality. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the first day of conference. On behalf of the organizer, we'd like to extend our deepest appreciation to you all for your support and participation. We still have 2 days of the conference. Once again, thank you.